Welcome back. Another wonderful day of Fusion 360. This is going to be the fourth video in the current Fusion series I'm making. And the last one included things like rendering, really important tips and tricks on how to render your objects really nicely. We did the second video in the series includes making this bolt. And the first video just goes through the details of using Fusion in a basic sense. Doesn't include really in-depth details about specific environments or tools. It's just about using Fusion. But one thing that I really suggest you should watch is the first video, and that is because it talks about changing parameters. This is important, especially when you start doing some very complicated designs, because the parameters are going to save you from doing extra work in the future when you are fixing something, changing something. Let's say you want to change one small thing in an object. Well, the parameters adjust everything around it as long as they are linked to a certain parameter. Watch the first video, goes through some basic senses of this. You can find some other videos online that explain that in much more detail. Today we're going to look at sketching. We're going to look at some basics in sketching, and we are also going to redesign the beginning of this bolt, just the head part, in the sketching environment, because the head has those little ridges, it has those grips on it. This is an M3 bolt. It has these. So we're going to look at how to design this in a different way, more of a sort of engineering professional CAD design way. And we're going to get right into that right now with a brand new design. So the first thing first is always save. I'm going to Command S and save it as Fusion 04 because it's the fourth video in our series. Now, what did I call it before? Fusion 360, yeah, 02. 03 was rendering, wasn't a need for a different one for that. Now, let's get right into it. We're going to start with the head of our 3mm bolt. Now, when you open the sketch environment, there's a few things that you should be aware of. One, when you click it, the origin will pop up. If you have other objects in the view, let's say I have a cube over here, that will also be there too. You can use any flat surface as the reference for your sketch. Now what that means is that I can use any of these origins, right, X, Y, and Z planes, or I can use a part of this cube. If I want to design on this part of the cube, I can click that and it will go right to that, zoom in, and you can draw on there. That's the basics of the start in sketching. It will also snap its view to whatever you select. You can see I did this. If I cancel out, go back to sketch, I click this, it will snap to the view. That's important to realize too. You can turn this off. I turned it back on, to be honest, because I personally don't like how it snaps. Sometimes I have very complicated objects and the view gets cluttered when it snaps to a certain position. So I usually set up so I can see it clearly, and then I sketch where I can currently see. That's just my workflow. You can do whatever you want. But how you change it is up here on the right-hand side under your name or logo, whatever is in your Fusion file or Fusion software. In the preferences, I think it's under the Design tab. There's one of the options. It says Snap View to Sketching. Actually, I'll just go there right now. Preferences, because this is supposed to be for education design. I think it's auto look at sketch. It's right there. That's right. So I turn that off myself. I'm going to keep it on for just this video. And then I'm also going to remove this. This here is what my keyboard is doing. Shift, right? Command, etc. If you've seen previous videos, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to reiterate that again. So here we go. Sketching. I'm going to sketch on the Z plane. There's the top, and just by reference, that will tell me that is the Z plane. If you're brand new to Fusion and you have experience using, let's say, AutoCAD or other drawing software, some engineering or professional, let's say, architecture drawing software programs, then this will be quite familiar to you, just different looks and different feels, but the tools and the way that it works should be very familiar. If you are new to Fusion but also have no experience sketching at all, this will be a great way to start, because I'm going to show you some things that you might not realize right away, or little tidbit tricks that will help you avoid some frustrating things that, I promise you, frustrating things that I've gone through when I first learned Fusion that I now know, and it changed everything, because it was very, very hard to deal with certain things that weren't working the way I wanted them to. Now, the first things first, you can make your environment different. This is always a personal preference. Down here below, you have the movement and view options, which is the same as your middle mouse button, right? Moving around. But you also have things like your environment settings and mesh details and other different tabs you can mess around with. The environment settings is quite common for the first little bit of using your sketching. Let's say you're an architect or you are an engineer, you might want to go to blue. It's always personal preference. This is a personal preference thing. The default, I think, is the infinity pool. You can go photo booth, you can go gray, dark sky, whatever your preference is. I'm going to go back to the default in Fusion just to make it interesting and to keep it even Steven for everybody else who just starts out with the program. Other thing is this grid. If it's not here for some reason, that is over here on the sketch palette. We have the sketch grid. We have snapping, which will snap your objects when you're drawing to the grid. And that's always dependent on if you zoom in or zoom out, because the grid adjusts its size, and it's always relative to where you are zoomed in and how far away you are from the object. You can actually change that. I think it's down here where something with the mesh display. One of these options should change it so that the grid itself, if you zoom in and zoom out, it won't actually change its size. It will keep the exact same distance per grid mark. And you can set that up if you want that. You can do anything you want. The last thing, profile, etc. We don't need that kind of stuff for a long time. Constraints, if you don't want the constraints, that's here, but they're already up in the toolbar. I'm guessing that's from previous versions of Fusion. The last thing, which can really mess you up if you have already existing 3D objects like that cube I deleted a minute ago, is this. If this is selected, then the tools will also snap to the 3D objects outside of this sketch plane. So just watch that. I've done that a few times. It's kind of messed me up, and I zoom out and I pull out of the sketch environment, and it's just a total disaster, even though it looked fine in the environment. It happens sometimes. Now, let's start out. We're going to start out with our center diameter circle. This is one of the default tools. You can add tools to the toolbar by just clicking here and pin to toolbar. So again, put that back. I'm not going to be in the right place. I'm going to drag it back over. I think it was here. Now I'm going to go right from the origin point, the center of our classic high school math grid. Pull it out. And I remember that the head on our bolt is 6 millimeters in diameter. It looks small until you zoom in. In the sketch grid, it has adjusted itself 6 millimeters. Now you can pull it out and drag it to 6. Let's say I highlight this and delete. You can also click the center and pull it out until it says 6 in that box. And you can use the grid. You can snap to other points, but we're going to go right there. Now this is where I get in my first little trick, because this is a confusing part when you do something later, like moving a part of a sketch. If I click this and I click push M, I can now move my sketch, but if nothing's happening. Even though this is moving, it's showing me it's moving 1.5, 2. It's not actually moving anywhere. And this is where people get frustrated very, very fast, because the first thing to keep in mind is that Fusion needs a starting reference for everything you do. Whether you create a new object, a new sketch, whether you're in any other environment, whenever you make something new, it needs a reference as a starting point. And here's where Fusion gets a little sticky. The origin point is a static reference. That reference will always be the exact same, because it's very important for the way that the filing system and the constraints work, and everything works around the origin point. The origin point is dead center in 3D space. if you use the origin point as your reference, then whatever object uses that will be stuck. I mean in the sketch environment. 3D objects like making a box, if I go back here, will not be stuck. So this is in the sketch environment only. Let me right click and edit sketch again. So let's say this one won't move. If I make the exact same circle over here, 6, hit escape to cancel that tool out, still in the environment. Now if I click it and push M, I can actually move it. This one moves. Okay. Click this and push M. This one does not move. So if that happens to you, the first reason is probably because the reference point you use to create whatever that sketch object is locked in space, locked in the Fusion space. That's the reason. The second reason is it might have a constraint, and that's a sort of a later video. We don't really need to use these right now. We might use one or two as an example, but this is more of a medium level start out with our sketches. So we have 6 millimeters. Now, if you notice on the bolt earlier, those grips come inside the bolt. The outside of the grip, if I measured it around the entire thing, would be 6 millimeters. I don't think I actually made it like that, but we're going to keep that in our mind. Now I'm going to make a reference line. This is going to be to help me keep everything even across. So I'm going to start at the origin and pull out until the edge, and you can follow along. I hope you're following along and copying me. That reference line, that's going to help me snap to the edge of the circle. Let me show you why. If I did this and I went around the circle, I can go anywhere in between the grid points. Even though I add more grid points, I can still slide between. It's not actually snapping onto the grid. So that reference line I used is just to help me snap. And let's say I do 0.5 by 0.5. We can change it later. Like this, right? Now I have that reference point and I can click it and delete it, and now it's gone. The other way to do this, let me back out, is to select your center rectangle, go to the origin and drag up. And what it's doing is it's following that line and it will snap. And because you did that, it's going to come back and snap to it. If I escape out and go here, it's not actually going to snap there anymore. So you got to first find the reference, drag out from the reference, and then you can do it again. Go 0.5, 0.5. There we go. So now we have the start of it. The next thing I want to do is probably create a bit of a curve on that edge, because nothing in real life will ever be perfectly 90 degrees like this, especially with a very small object being machined by a CNC or by hand, I guess. And this is where I get to modify it. So fillet is a very common way to create a curve. The other way would be to draw a circle out from that center point. But I'm going to use the fillet command, and all you do with this one is select 2 lines that you want to have an arch between them, and then that arch amount in sizing comes up. I think 0.1 is fine to start. 0.1 works really well. And you notice these things pop up. These lines here tell me that these two are parallel, these two are parallel down below. It's always a cross for parallel. Perpendicular is a different symbol. And then we have the equal radius or equal tangent, and our R is radius, and 0.1 will be the size. You can change this, double click it, 0.2, and it changes. It adjusts everything around it. And this is where I get into the next annoying thing that Fusion does sometimes. I don't know why it does this, but this is it. You notice how the green line here is the center line. It's off now. If I Command Z, it goes back. Command Shift Z, it goes forward. So this is where I want to do something with the lock command. And you can lock this right there, and that's fine. This actually might lock that one too. Escape out. Let's see what happens. Can I fillet this? 0.1. I can. You can still work with it. But because I locked just this one down here, these are all referencing it, because that's parallel, That's parallel. And now, because that's locked, I'm not going to be moving it. Let's say I go back. I like to do this a lot. Apologies if it takes too long, but it's just for education's sake. If I do this again and I fillet this, it might move. Let me see if it moves. It doesn't move. Just the first one. Maybe someone can tell me why it does this. I've never actually figured it out why. I haven't really looked into it either. But that's it. Constraints, I got a warning already. So that's the beginning of it. Next thing, we are going to make the exact same rounded angle on the outside. And the reason why I'm doing this is just for, let's say, CNC sake, because you'll probably use the same bit, the same tool to cut this, which means that angle will be easily cut if it's the same one down here. If it's a sharper angle and that tool is too large to fit in that sharper curve, the smaller curve, I mean, then you have to get a different tool to do the inside cut. So just for real world usage and making sake, I'm going to keep the exact same curve. And let's do that with a different method, which is the circle method. And here's where we get to have some fun and use the concentric constraint. So I know that that's a radius of 0.1. This tells me I need to give it the diameter, centered diameter circle. So anywhere you want, I'm going to zoom in, 0.1 becomes 0.2. So 0.2 is the diameter because the radius is 0.1. Now I'm going to click my lock button, and this is from experience. I'm going to lock this main circle, the main head. I'm going to lock that, push escape to cancel. Hit my, not the concentric, sorry, the tangent constraint. If there's a circle and a line, you're basically taking whatever point of that circle is, which is technically infinitely nothing, and you are sliding it as close as you can up until a separate line. I'm going to click my circle, the one I want to move, and I'm going to click my main head, and it just slid right down. It goes to the closest point. The next thing, same thing, tangent, click here, and click my cut. Now we have the start of our curve. 0.1 radius, 0.1 radius. Exact same because it's the diameter of 0.2. Next, we're going to use our favorite trim tool. Push T for the shortcut if you want. There's not many in here. It's just the second one. This one has a few different options. Now with this tool, very, very handy in the way that it uses the current references that are already existing for each line. Now, if you scroll over a couple of these lines, some parts go red, some parts go blue. I'm sure you already figured out that the red means get rid of and the blue means keep. Now, what it does is it finds any existing line and it attaches, it makes it all basically one connected large object, even if it's different objects, different circles and squares and different tangents all together. We have a connection of right there. If I go back here, that line, this is all connected. So that joint there separates the red and the blue. Even the referencing lines here become one of the referencing lines becomes one of the references for the cut. Using the same word twice is not good. Now, all I want to do is get rid of the outside of the circle. I can click like that, and now I have that inside curve. The same curve as this because it's the same measurements. The other way, just to go back, is to drag. If you drag, it turns to the square, which is one of our selection options, and all you do is drag over top of what you want to remove. I'm going to bring that back. So we have half of it. The other half, we are going to need a reference line for. This is going to be for the mirroring tool. I'm trying to use as many different tools as I can, just with this very small example. If I click this, I want to copy this and make it exactly the same over here without having to redraw and do all those different steps. Mirror, I don't have an actual mirror reference. I can actually use the origin. If I zoom out, you can use the origin line, or you can't. I guess that only works in 3D space. So I'm going to create my own reference line. I know that this is the center because it shows me right there with the dot. I'm going to draw up, and you can just find that, and 90 degrees is perfect. I am set. I'm lagging for some reason. I don't know why. Now I have my center reference. Click the object you want to mirror. Come over, use the mirror line, and we click. And it's there. Finish it off. Good. Get rid of our reference. I don't need it anymore. So now I have this. Next thing is to clear up a couple things down here. You don't have to, but I'm going to anyways. I'm going to clear up this, 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 and this, just to remove the stuff I don't need. The next thing, I might want to remove this. I might want to remove this. Just the same rules, right? It uses whatever the connecting reference is as a cut point. That was a better explanation. So now I have the basic outline of my head. Now this might not be perfect because I didn't do the math on how many exact cuts I need around this circle. This is what, 6 millimeters. I don't know how many it's going to be exactly, but if you were, you'd actually change the width of this part. I actually should have went the opposite direction on the inside, but that's okay. So now it'll be 7 millimeters. How big is this? It'll be 6.5 millimeters. That's fine. This is just as an example. This is not going to be realistic. So this head's 6.5 millimeters. Next thing we're going to use one of my favorite tools is the pattern tools. There's a few different patterns. There's one more pattern, which is the line pattern in the 3D space, not the sketch environment. What I'm going to do is highlight this because I don't want to select each line individually. And I'm going to click my pattern button so that it will default to whatever you selected. Now, the other way, like I said, which is to select everything, objects, select, select, select. It takes forever. You can also highlight, but then it gets a bit confusing. Hold shift, there we go. 24, I don't want all those. I just want this. Okay, center point, or center circle, basically. You can use this. I'm going to use the actual head itself. And the default is always 3 for these pattern tools. Let's try 20. We zoom in. You know what? I think that was a good number right off the bat. I don't know what the size of this is. It doesn't look like it's exact, but it's pretty close. 20. Good enough. Let me just check, just for my sanity's sake. 0.3 length. I'm using the measurement tool. Reset. From here, 0.2635. So it's close. You'd have to adjust these by a very, very small amount in their width to make it even. So it's kind of like a gear, but that's a different math problem for another day. If you want me to show you how to make gears, the rules for making gears, I can show you. There's actually a plug-in for Fusion that does it for you. Now we have our bolt. This is the head. This is just the beginning. We have all our curves involved. The last step is to finish your sketch once you're finished with what you want and extrude it to make it 3D. Now, if I just move the camera, you can see it's just a 2D object. If you want to change something, you can always just right-click on the history down here and you can edit your sketch. It will go back to that environment. Or let's say I extrude this out like this. I'm going to actually highlight everything and hold select and then click that so it's everything. I think it was 3 millimeters tall. That's fine. 3 millimeters, new body, I'm done. The sketch will disappear once you make it 3D. It's not gone forever, it's just hidden. The sketch is still there. And here's where you get to the last thing in our sketching environment. The last tip and trick is nothing is set in stone. You can always change it. You can right click here or right click on the history of that sketch and you can edit that sketch. It will go back in time. But let's say I want to change this. I want to change this to 0.12. It probably won't actually because it's referencing. Will it work? It's thinking for days. Great. Did I just find a bug in Fusion? No, I didn't. Those things are a bit wonky now. That's fine. Let's see what happens. Now that 0.12 becomes only one side of each ridge, but it adjusts here too. So this is the basis of the sketch environment. I hope this helps you. I try to make this video as short as possible because other ones are quite long. Thanks for watching, and subscribe, like the video, share it, because it's really nice getting other people involved in this. Especially let me know what you would want to see in a video. Certain tools, certain things aren't working the way you think they should, or maybe you just want extra tips and tricks on a way of doing your workflow within Fusion. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.